My husband is on a luxury vacation while I'm at our daughter's funeral. He texted, "I'll call you later, important meeting," but he doesn't know what I've already done. Before we continue to the beginning of the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to continue hearing incredible stories about revenge from empowered women. I never imagined a day like this would come. No mother should ever have to bury her child. Yet here I stood, frozen in place, staring at the casket that held my daughter, Grace. My breath felt heavy, my body weak, as though grief had drained me of every ounce of strength. The air was thick with sorrow, the kind that clings to your skin and seeps into your bones. Family and friends murmured their condolences, but their words barely registered. How could they? How could any words ever fill the emptiness left by a child who should have had her whole life ahead of her? The chapel was drenched in white lilies, the ones Grace used to say smelled like angels breathing. She had always been poetic, even as a little girl. The priest spoke softly, his voice blending into the background hum of whispered sobs. My fingers clutched the folded piece of paper in my hand, a letter I had written to Grace, one I would never get to read to her. My vision blurred as I looked out at the crowd, and then my heart tightened. Neil wasn't here. My husband. The man who was supposed to be my rock. The man who had promised, time and time again, that we would face this together. I had held on to that promise, foolishly believing that even in our pain, we would still be a family. But his absence was a wound of its own. The seat next to mine remained empty, an unspoken betrayal in the middle of an already unbearable day. I wanted to be angry, but I was too shattered to feel anything beyond grief. Grace had fought until the very end. She had smiled through her pain, laughed through her exhaustion, and held my hand with a strength far beyond her years. She had been my light, and now that light was gone, snuffed out too soon. The funeral moved forward, yet time seemed to stand still. People spoke of her kindness, her talent for painting, her love for the ocean. But the only thing I could hear was the echo of her laughter in my memories, so alive, so vibrant, and now, forever silent. I ran my fingers over the edges of her framed photograph. She was grinning, the sun catching in her curls, her eyes holding that same spark of wonder she had since childhood. She was only 16, too young, too precious to be taken so soon. My lips trembled as I whispered, "I'm so sorry, baby. Sorry for not being able to save her. Sorry for not being able to take her place. Sorry that she had to leave before she ever had the chance to live." Then, the priest invited me to speak. I stood, but my legs felt like lead. My hands trembled. My throat burned. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but now, standing before them, words failed me. How do you condense a lifetime of love into a few sentences? How do you say goodbye when you don't want to let go? My fingers tightened around the paper, but in the end, I didn't read it. Instead, I spoke from the only place that mattered, my heart. Grace was everything to me. She was laughter on the darkest days. She was the warmth of the sun after a storm. She was the sound of waves crashing on the shore, free, beautiful, untamed. I don't know how to live in a world without her, and I don't think I ever will. But I do know this. She wouldn't want me to drown in my grief. She would want me to be strong, to keep going. And somehow, for her, I will try. A wave of emotion swept through the room. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Grace's best friend clung to her father. Even the priest seemed to pause, swallowing the lump in his throat. And yet, despite the collective mourning, the one person who should have been here wasn't. Neil. My hands clenched at my sides. Where, The hell was he? The service ended. One by one, people approached me with their soft-spoken sympathies. I nodded, I hugged, I thanked them, all on autopilot. My mind was elsewhere, stuck in the space between sorrow and suspicion. Neil had been distant for months. Excuses, late nights, hushed phone calls. I had chalked it up to grief, believing that he too was struggling with our daughter's illness. But now, as I stood alone, staring at the empty spot beside me, an unsettling feeling began to take root. I stepped outside, desperate for air. The sky was a dull gray, the world mourning with me. I pulled my phone from my purse, not even sure why. Maybe some foolish part of me thought I'd find a message from Neil. Something, anything, to explain his absence. And then, as if fate had been waiting for the perfect moment to break me further, my screen lit up with a text. From Neil. Sorry, couldn't make it. Important meeting. I read it twice. Then a third time. My stomach twisted, a slow burn rising in my chest. An important meeting? Today? My daughter's funeral? The man I had shared my life with for nearly 20 years had just brushed this off. My fingers curled, so tightly around my phone that my nails bit into my palm. And then, as I stared at the message, something even worse caught my eye. The location tag. Right below his text, the small, damning detail that shattered any last thread of belief I had in him. Neil wasn't at a meeting. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't hurting. He was at a luxury beach resort. For a moment, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. It had to be a mistake, some kind of glitch. But no. There it was, clear as day. The location tag pinned Neil at an expensive resort, far from the cold reality of our daughter's funeral. My fingers trembled as I stared at the screen, my breath caught between a sob and a scream. Important meeting? The words felt like acid, burning through what little patience I had left. I zoomed in on the map, tracing the details of his exact location. The resort's name sat mockingly beneath it, a place we had once dreamed of visiting together, back when we still made plans for the future, back when we were a family. My heart pounded, a slow, seething rage boiling beneath my grief. He lied. Not just today. This wasn't the action of a man who had just slipped up. This was betrayal of a much deeper kind. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't the same ones I had shed all morning. These weren't tears of loss, but of fury. How dare he? How dare he abandon me, abandon Grace on today of all days? I had spent the last few years watching our daughter wither away, holding her hand through unbearable pain, whispering to her that she wasn't alone. And where had he been? Working late, traveling, always conveniently elsewhere. Now I knew why. Walked away from the church steps, ignoring the mourners still gathered in hushed conversation. I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't pretend to be the grieving widow of a man who had already left me long before today. My car was parked near the entrance, but I didn't get in. Instead, I stood there, gripping my phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white, fighting the overwhelming urge to call him and unleash every ounce of anger I had bottled up inside. Would he even pick up, or would he ignore my call like he had ignored our life together? I pictured him lounging under the sun, sipping some overpriced drink, utterly detached from the nightmare I was living. The thought made me sick. He was supposed to be drowning. In grief, not margaritas. I opened our old text messages, scrolling up through the weeks of vague excuses. Work's been crazy. I'll be home late. Big project coming up. I can't step away. Lie after lie, each one now fitting into a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was solving. And Grace... oh God. Had she noticed? Had she known he was slipping away from us even before she passed? The possibility sent a fresh stab of pain through my chest. I had been so focused on keeping her strong, so determined to give her as much love as I could in her final days, that I hadn't stopped to wonder if she felt his absence. Had she died thinking he didn't care? The thought made my vision blur with hot, angry tears. I took a deep, shuddering breath and tapped the screen to call him. 1 ring, 2, 3, voicemail. Of course. The coward wouldn't dare answer. Not now. Not after everything. My hands shook as I lowered the phone. If I confronted him now, I would lose control. And I refused to let him have that satisfaction. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my laptop and logged into our shared bank account. If he was at a luxury resort, he must have paid for it. And if there was a paper trail, I was going to find it. My pulse hammered as I navigated through the transaction history. And then, there it was. Thousands of dollars withdrawn over the last few months. A cold, sharp realization settled over me. This wasn't just a one-time betrayal. This wasn't a mistake. This was premeditated. I could feel the pieces of my shattered heart turning to stone. I had cried enough for one day. Enough for a lifetime. But I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was a woman scorned, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I wiped my tears away and straightened my back. Fine, I thought. Let's play, Neil. You've had your fun. Now it's my turn. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as rage simmered just beneath my skin. Every moment of our life together played like a cruel movie in my mind. Every I love you, every anniversary dinner, every whispered promise that now felt like a joke. How long had he been lying? Had any of it ever been real? The grief of losing Grace had already shattered me. But this betrayal was something else entirely. It wasn't just about an affair. It was about the fact that, while I was begging for one more day with my daughter, Neil had been out there, living as if we never even existed. I needed proof. Real proof. The bank statements were damning enough, but I needed to know the full extent of his deceit. So I did what any scorned wife would do. I grabbed my laptop, logged into our shared accounts, and started digging. And what I found? It made my stomach turn. Every late-night meeting, every business trip, every excuse. All carefully orchestrated, all leading to the same conclusion. He had been living a double life. The receipts painted the picture in gruesome detail. Fancy restaurants, weekend getaways, jewelry. None of it for me, none of it for Grace. And the final nail in the coffin? A series of transactions for a beachside apartment, rented under the name of another woman. I clicked on her name. Lila. A young, impossibly beautiful woman with an Instagram page full of filtered sunsets and champagne flutes. Scrolling through her photos felt like pressing on an open wound. I had spent the last 2 years watching my daughter slip away, counting down the days, fighting for every last second. Meanwhile, Neil had been here, smiling in photos, holding another woman, living another life. I clicked on a recent picture of them together. The caption read, "Life is meant to be lived. No regrets. No regrets." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. No regrets? That bastard had the audacity to live guilt-free while I was drowning in sorrow. While I was holding my daughter's frail hand, watching her fight for breath, he was off sipping cocktails with his mistress. My hands shook as I shut the laptop. I had seen enough. I wanted to scream, to break something. But instead, I stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at the woman staring back at me. She wasn't just broken. She wasn't just grieving. She was furious. For years, I had been the quiet one, the forgiving one, the one who let things slide for the sake of peace. But Neil had just burned every last ounce of goodwill I had left. And now? Now I was going to burn his world to the ground. I've always believed that truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply someone tries to bury it. And if Neil thought he could deceive me, if he thought he could hide behind his carefully constructed lies, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I wasn't going to sit back and cry. I was going to dig up every dirty secret he thought he had buried. The next morning, I made a call. Not to Neil, not to a friend, but to a private investigator. His name was Carter. Gruff, no nonsense, the kind of man who had seen the worst of humanity and stopped being surprised by it. When I explained my situation, he let out a slow breath. "Lady, I've seen a lot, but skipping your own daughter's funeral to vacation with your mistress? That's low, even for a cheating husband." I clenched my jaw. "I need proof, real, undeniable proof." Carter chuckled. "Oh, I'll get you proof. The question is, what are you planning to do with it?" That was the thing. I wasn't sure yet. Revenge? Divorce? Ruin his life the way he ruined mine? Maybe all of the above. But first, I needed answers. "I'll figure that out later. Just find me everything you can." Carter got to work immediately, and within a day, he had already uncovered more than I ever imagined. It was worse than I thought. Much worse. Neil hadn't just been having an affair with Lila. He had been funding their entire relationship using our money. Lavish gifts, extravagant vacations, rent for that beachside apartment. It was all coming from our accounts. But that wasn't even the most horrifying part. No. The real gut punch came when Carter sent me a file detailing large, unauthorized withdrawals. Tens of thousands of dollars gone, siphoned into accounts I didn't recognize. I pressed the phone tighter, against my ear. "Where is the money going?" Carter exhaled. "Some of it to her, but some. It's just disappearing. Offshore accounts, maybe. He's covering his tracks. Whatever he's doing, it's not just cheating. This is fraud. Fraud." The word echoed in my mind. I had spent years trusting Neil, believing he was the responsible one, the financial planner, the man who kept us afloat during our hardest times. And now I learned he was stealing from us, from Grace. My stomach twisted in disgust. This wasn't just a man having a midlife crisis. This was a man who had abandoned his dying daughter, drained our accounts, and was now living like a king while I was left with the pieces. Carter wasn't done. He sent me a folder of photos. Neil and Lila, arm in arm at a fancy restaurant. Neil pulling cash from an ATM. Neil signing papers with a man who did not look like a legitimate businessman. My head spun. "So," Carter said, his voice laced with curiosity, "now that you have your proof, what's your next move?" I stared at the screen, my pulse steady and cold. For the first time since Grace's funeral, I felt something stronger than grief, stronger than betrayal. Purpose. "I ruin him," I said, my voice calm. Completely. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused, cold, determined. Neil had spent years weaving a web of lies, thinking he could steal, cheat, and abandon without consequences. He thought I would stay broken, too blinded by grief to fight back. But he had underestimated me. Grief doesn't just destroy, it sharpens. And I was about to use every piece of my pain to take him down. Carter had given me a good start, but I needed more. I needed every document, every receipt, every wire transfer, every message he had ever sent. The truth had to be undeniable, so airtight that when I confronted him, he would have nowhere to run. And so, I became my own detective, spent hours combing through our financial records, tracking every suspicious transaction. The more I looked, the clearer the pattern became. Neil had been slowly draining our accounts for over a year. Thousands pulled in small, strategic amounts, just enough to avoid raising immediate suspicion. And then there were the larger withdrawals, the ones tied to Lila, the ones that proved this wasn't just an affair. It was a full-scale deception. But I needed more than numbers. I needed his own words. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I hacked into his email. It wasn't hard. Neil had always been lazy with passwords. And what I found? It was worse than I imagined. Dozens of messages. Messages where he promised Lila a new life. Once he finalized things with me. Messages where he complained about having to pretend to be grieving. Messages where he mocked me. She's just so emotional these days. I swear, if I have to hear her cry one more time about Grace, I might actually go insane. The breath left my lungs. He mocked me. He mocked our daughter's death. He had been out there, living his second life, while I sat by Grace's bedside, praying for a miracle, and he had the audacity to call me emotional? I clenched my fists, my vision blurring with fury. But I couldn't lose control. Not yet. Instead, I saved every message. Screenshots, forwarded emails, everything. Then I went deeper. I checked his cloud storage, his deleted files, even his social media drafts. He had been careless, thinking I would never look. And then, the final piece fell into place. Hidden among his files, labeled under a fake work document, was a contract. Signed. Sealed. Proof that he had liquidated one of our investment accounts. One meant for Grace's medical expenses. My stomach churned. This man, the one I had built a life with, had stolen from his own dying daughter. He had stolen her chance at a future. I sat there, gripping the papers, my mind blank with shock, but only for a moment. Because when the initial wave of nausea passed, a new feeling took its place, a quiet, lethal resolve. I had enough. Enough to destroy his career. Enough to ruin his finances. Enough to ensure that he would never be able to walk away from this unscathed. It was time. Time for the ultimate confrontation. Revenge isn't always about rage. Sometimes it's about precision, about taking your time, building the moment, letting the guilty believe they've won, until the ground beneath them disappears. Neil had stolen from me, from Grace, from the very life we were supposed to share. But today, I was taking it all back. I sent Neil a text. We need to talk. I don't want to fight anymore. Let's meet for dinner. Just you and me. It took him less than a minute to respond. Finally, let's talk. Of course, he thought I was crawling back. He thought I was the same woman who had once cried over his absence, who had once begged for his support. But tonight, he was about to meet someone else. Someone who wasn't mourning him anymore. I booked a table at an upscale restaurant, one I knew he wouldn't say no to. One with dim lighting, hushed conversations, a place where powerful men whispered secrets over expensive wine. He arrived first, dressed in the same designer suit I now knew had been paid for with stolen money. When he saw me, he smirked. The arrogance, the sheer confidence of a man who believed he had gotten away with everything. "I'm glad you reached out," he said smoothly, standing to pull out my chair. "We've been through a lot. I think we both just need to—" I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Let's not waste time, Neil." His smirk faltered, just slightly. He sat back down, tilting, his head. "All right, what's on your mind?" I slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything." He glanced at it, then back at me. His fingers didn't move to pick it up. "What is this?" "Evidence." My voice was steady, cold. Bank statements, fraudulent transactions, emails to Lila, screenshots, Of you mocking me while our daughter was dying. His jaw tensed, but I wasn't done. Oh, and there's a video montage of Grace. You know, just in case you forgot who you abandoned. The blood drained from his face. This is ridiculous, he hissed, keeping his voice low. You don't understand. I understand everything. I leaned in, my tone unwavering. I know about the offshore accounts, the embezzlement, the lies. You've been stealing, cheating, and smiling through it all. But here's the thing, Neil, it's over. For the first time since this started, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. He was calculating, trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. Are you threatening me? He asked, voice tight. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I don't need to threaten you. I've already reported everything. I leaned back, taking my time. Your firm? They'll see the financial discrepancies by morning. The authorities? They'll get the full report tonight. And Lila? I let out a small, humorless chuckle. She'll know exactly how much you planned, to finalize things with me before discarding her too. Neil's breathing grew uneven. His fingers twitched, his confidence cracking. You don't want to do this, he said. We can figure something out. Talk to me. I'll fix this. I tilted my head, studying him like the stranger he had become. You don't get to fix this, I said softly. You destroyed everything. And now, you finally get to face the consequences. His phone buzzed. He flinched. I knew who it was. His world was already crumbling, one notification at a time. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my dress. Enjoy your meal, Neil. It's the last time you'll have dinner as a free man. Then I walked out, leaving him there, speechless, powerless, and for the first time in his life, completely alone. I walked out of that restaurant without looking back. I didn't need to. I already knew what was happening. The walls were closing. And on Neil, the messages, the reports, the evidence I had spent weeks collecting, everything was now in motion. There was no undoing it. No way for him to talk his way out. No second chances. I got into my car and exhaled, my hands gripping the wheel. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The pain was still there. Of course it was. But for the first time, it wasn't paralyzing. It wasn't swallowing me whole. I had turned it into something else. Something sharper. Then my phone buzzed. Neil. I let it ring. Once. Twice. A desperate voicemail notification popped up. Then another. And another. I smiled. He must have checked his accounts by now, found them frozen. Must have checked his email and seen the notice from his company's legal team. Must have seen the headlines already starting to spread. I played the voicemail. His voice, once so smooth, was now frantic, breathless. You don't understand what you've done, he spat. You think you're smart? You think you won? You're ruining my life. I almost laughed. Ruining his life? He had destroyed mine first. And Grace's. The next message was quieter, almost pleading. We can fix this. You don't have to do this. Just call me back. Please, please. The same man who had mocked me. The same man who had stolen from our daughter. The same man who had kissed another woman while I held Grace's hand in a hospital room. Now he wanted mercy. I deleted the message. By the next morning, it was everywhere. High-profile financial advisor under investigation for embezzlement. His company issued a statement that they were fully cooperating with authorities. Clients were demanding refunds. The firm had cut ties. And Neil? He was spiraling. Carter sent me updates. Neil had tried to withdraw cash but found his accounts locked. He had tried to book a flight, but authorities were already watching him. He had nowhere to run. Then came the knock on my door. It was the Police. They weren't here for me, of course. They just wanted to confirm a few details about the financial reports I had submitted, about the fraud, about the stolen money. I told them everything. By the time I was done, they exchanged glances, nodding. "Thank you for your cooperation," one of them said. "We expect an arrest warrant will be issued soon." I closed the door and let out a slow breath. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was justice. Neil had spent years thinking he could manipulate people, steal, cheat, and come out unscathed. But now, he was just another criminal waiting to fall. It happened faster than I expected. Less than 24 hours after the police visit, Neil was in handcuffs. I hadn't planned to be there when it happened. I thought I'd be satisfied just knowing it was coming. But when Carter sent me a message saying, "It's happening now," I couldn't resist. I drove downtown, parked across from his office, and waited. The scene unfolded like a slow-motion movie. The building's glass doors swung open, and there he was, Neil, flanked by 2 officers, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked disheveled, nothing like the polished man who had once commanded boardrooms. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie askew. His face was pale, his eyes darting wildly as cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. "Mr. Calloway, is it true you embezzled company funds? What do you have to say about the fraud allegations? How long have you been stealing from your own clients?" Neil's jaw clenched as he kept his head down. But then, he saw me. I had stepped out of my car, just far enough for him to notice. Our eyes locked across the chaos. His face twisted into something between rage and desperation. He started saying something, maybe my name, maybe a curse. But the officers shoved him toward the waiting police car before he could finish. I just stood there, watching, absorbing the moment. A part of me had imagined this moment differently. I thought I might feel victorious, triumphant. But as the police car pulled away, all I felt was relief. Not happiness, not joy. Just the weight of him, his lies, his betrayal, his absence, finally leaving my life. That night, the news was everywhere. Neil Calloway, trusted financial advisor turned fraudster. The scandal had spread beyond his company. Clients were furious, investors were suing. Even his so-called friends were distancing themselves. The man who had once prided himself on being untouchable was falling. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street. My phone buzzed with messages from people who had heard. Family, friends, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. I saw the news. I can't believe it. He deserves everything coming to him. You're stronger than I ever realized. But the message that caught me off guard wasn't from them. It was from Lila. "I didn't know," she wrote. "About Grace. About what he did. I swear I didn't know." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned the phone over, letting it rest face down on the table. I didn't have anything to say to her. Not now. Maybe not ever. Neil was gone. His empire had crumbled. The world was finally seeing him for what he really was, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I thought Neil was out of my life for good. I thought I had closed that chapter, sealed it shut with the sound of a jail cell locking behind him. But then, the letter arrived. It came in a plain, creased envelope. My name scrawled on the front in handwriting I once knew so well. It had no return address, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly where it had come from. For a long time, I didn't open it. I let it sit on the kitchen table, staring at me like a ghost from the past. A part of me wanted to burn it. Another part, one I wasn't proud of, wanted to read every single word. Because despite everything, despite all the lies, the betrayal, the damage, a small part of me still wanted to know why. In the end, Curiosity won. I slid a knife under the seal and unfolded the letter with careful fingers. The paper was cheap, prison issued. The ink slightly smudged. But the words hit like a punch to the gut. I know you'll probably never forgive me. I don't expect you to. But there's something you need to know. I ran. I didn't leave because of you. I didn't leave because I didn't love Grace. I left because I couldn't face it. I knew she was dying, and The sentence cut off abruptly, a smudge where his pen must have hesitated. I was a coward. I told myself. I was protecting you, that I was handling things, that my work, the money, it was all to keep us afloat. But the truth is, I couldn't stand to watch her slip away. So I ran. I told myself lies, just like I told you. And once I started running, I didn't know how to stop. I felt my throat tighten, my fingers trembling slightly. Coward, he said. It himself. There's something else. There was a treatment. I sat up straighter, my pulse spiking. It was experimental, not guaranteed, but there was a chance, a small one. The doctors told me about it before they told you. And I didn't tell you. The air in the room shifted. A cold, invisible weight pressed against my chest. I was afraid. It was expensive, risky. And part of me thought, what if it fails? What if we lose her anyway? I told myself it was pointless, that I was making the rational decision. But now, in this cell, with nothing but time and regret, I keep asking myself, what if I was wrong? Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I read on, my nails digging into my palm. I should have told you. I should have let you decide. Maybe it wouldn't have worked. Maybe nothing could have saved her. But at least we would have tried. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. But I needed you to know the truth. And I needed to say one last thing, even if you never read this. I'm sorry. The last words were scratched into the page, like he had pressed the pen too hard, as if writing them had been physically painful. I let the letter slip from my fingers, my breathing unsteady. My mind was reeling, a hurricane of emotions. Anger, regret, loss. 1,000 what-ifs crashing into me all at once. What if I had known? What if we had tried? Would Grace still be here? Would she have had a chance? I swallowed hard. But the truth was, it didn't matter now. Grace was gone. Neil was in prison. And no amount of regret, no late confession, was going to change that. I stood up, walked over to the fireplace, and without hesitation, dropped the letter into the flames. I watched it curl, blacken, turn to ash. And as the last of Neil's words burned away, I whispered the only response I would ever give him. I don't forgive you. The fire crackled softly as the last remnants of Neil's letter disintegrated into nothing, just like him. Just like the life I once thought we had. There was no more anger left to burn. No more battles to fight. Only silence. Only the vast, empty space of what came next. For so long, my life had been defined by loss. First Grace. Then, my marriage. Then the illusion that Neil had ever been the man I believed in. And now, with nothing left to uncover, no more truths to unearth, I found myself staring into a future I had never planned for. I didn't know where to begin. For weeks, I moved through life like a ghost, going through the motions, trying to figure out what it meant to exist outside of grief and vengeance. People reached out, friends, distant relatives, but I couldn't bring myself to engage. They had moved on. I wasn't sure if I could. Then, One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of Grace's old room. The door had been shut for months. I hesitated before pushing it open, bracing myself for the wave of emotions I knew would hit. But when I stepped inside, something unexpected happened. It wasn't just sadness that filled me. It was warmth. The room still smelled faintly of her, lavender and the faintest trace of paint from her art supplies. Her sketches were still pinned to the eye, corkboard, messy and vibrant, bursting with the creativity she never got to fully explore. Her books, her favorite stuffed animals, the little notes she used to leave for me on my nightstand, tiny, fragile pieces of a life that had been cut too short. And then I saw it. A notebook, half tucked under her pillow. I picked it up carefully, running my fingers over the cover. It was one of her journals, the ones she used to fill with thoughts and dreams and ideas for the future. My heart clenched as I flipped through the pages, her handwriting dancing across them like echoes of a voice I would never hear again. One entry caught my eye. I don't want to be forgotten. I hope, no matter what happens, that I leave something behind. Something that matters. The breath left my lungs. I sat there for a long time, staring at her words, feeling the weight of them settle deep in my chest. And that was the moment I knew. I couldn't stay lost in grief. Not anymore. Grace had wanted to be remembered. She had wanted her life to mean something. And I couldn't let Neil's betrayal, his selfishness, be the thing that defined her story. She deserved better than that. That night, I made a decision. I opened my laptop and started drafting the first proposal for the Grace Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping families of terminally ill children, providing resources, support, and hope in the face of the unimaginable. A legacy in her name. For the first time in a long time, I felt something other than pain. I felt purpose. The Grace Foundation became more than just an idea. It became a mission, a purpose, a way forward. At first, it was just me, poring over legal documents, reaching out to medical professionals, crafting a vision from the ground up. But word spread. People came forward. Parents who had walked the same devastating path I had. Doctors who had fought alongside children like Grace. Volunteers who believed in something bigger than themselves. It grew. For the first time in years, I felt something new. Hope. But healing wasn't just about the foundation. It was about learning to live again. For so long, my world had been consumed by grief, then by anger, then by revenge. I had forgotten what it felt like to simply exist, to enjoy the little things, to wake up without feeling the crushing weight of loss. So I made a promise, to myself, to Grace, to the future. I started painting again. Grace would have liked that. She used to sit beside me, sketching while I filled canvases with colors that mirrored our moods. I hadn't picked up a brush since she got sick. But now, as I dragged the bristles across the canvas, it didn't feel like reopening a wound. It felt like reconnecting with her. I traveled, not to escape, but to explore, to see the world through her eyes. She had always dreamed of visiting the ocean in Greece, of walking through sunflower fields in Italy. So I went. I stood where she would have stood. And for a moment, in the hush of the waves or the golden stretch of endless flowers, I could almost feel her beside me. I opened my heart again. Not easily, not quickly, but slowly, cautiously, I let people back in. I formed friendships that weren't built on shared sorrow, but on laughter and life. And maybe, one day, I would love again. Not to replace what I had lost, but to honor it. Neil faded into the past. His name was no longer a ghost that haunted my every thought. He was simply a mistake, one I had survived, one that had led me here, to a place where I was no longer defined by what he had done. One afternoon, I sat on a park bench, watching the sun dip low over the horizon, bathing the world in gold and fire. I thought of Grace, of how she had always said that sunsets weren't endings, just proof that tomorrow was waiting. For the first time, I believed her. I smiled, closing my eyes against the warmth of the setting sun. Tomorrow was waiting, and I was finally ready for it.